Every week, Surfing the MASH Tsunami brings you three major stories from the world of steatotic liver disease. This weekend, we are bringing you each of those stories separately so you can listen during a shorter, discrete period of time. Hope you enjoy them.
For the last 5 years, MASLD stakeholders, whether manufacturers, trial sites, providers, payers, patients, or investors, have turned to Surfing the MASH Tsunami to keep track of drug and device development, epidemiology, public health initiatives, and practice patterns. This weekend, we are sharing the three main sections from our episode 3. Roger will provide more information after these notes from our sponsors.
Surfing the MASH Tsunami is sponsored by these healthcare-related organizations.
Madrigal Pharmaceuticals, Inc. is a biopharmaceutical company focused on delivering novel therapeutics for metabolic dysfunction-associated steatohepatitis, or MASH, a liver disease with high unmet medical need. Madrigal's medication, Rezdiffra, resmetirom, is a once-daily oral liver-directed THR beta agonist designed to target key underlying causes of MASH. Rezdiffra is the first and only medication approved by the FDA for the treatment of MASH with moderate to advanced fibrosis, consistent with stages F2 to F3. An ongoing Phase 3 outcomes trial is evaluating Rezdiffra for the treatment of compensated MASH cirrhosis, consistent with stage F4C. For more information, visit www.madrigalpharma.com.
Liver Right and the Liver Right Scanning Network. On April 15th, 2025, Liver Right will open America's first virtual specialty clinic for liver disease, offering adults in all 50 states video appointments and helping GI practices and health systems triage and treat the swelling numbers of patients seeking MASLD and MASH testing. Liver Right offers same-week video visits and accepts insurance. For more information, contact Liver Right, that's liver, and then RIGHT at www.liverright.com.
Tawazin Health, your partner in global liver health innovation. At Tawazin Health, we specialize in providing small or large-scale access to FibroScan examinations for liver health-focused early detection, clinical trials, independent research, and collaborative projects with clinicians and FibroScan providers increasingly throughout the world. As industry-leading experts, we design and deliver high-quality FibroScan services because we know that accurate, high-quality, reliable data drives better outcomes. To learn about our sister lifestyle app, mylife365.me, click the Tawazin Health link on the Surfing MASH homepage.
This week, our Newsmaker interview was with Mike Betel, founder and CEO of the Fatty Liver Alliance, and increasingly a presence in world conferences having to do with SLD and a range of related issues. What I wanted to talk with Mike about is, as he steps up his conference appearances from a few a year to maybe 15, 20, or even more a year around the globe, and as the issues that he's invited to talk about and hear about broaden, what are the themes that he's taking out of that? What does it mean for the liver community? What does it mean for metabolic disease in general? What messages is he able to share? What messages is he learning that he had not been privy to necessarily before? I think it's a fascinating conversation because Mike's had a tremendously interesting and engaging set of experiences. So sit back, listen, see what you think.
And now, here are Roger and Mike Betel with this week's expert segment.
We're back with week 4 Newsmaker interview of the week, and our Newsmaker for the second time in 4 weeks is Mike Betel from Fatty Liver Alliance. Mike, how are you this morning?
I'm great, and I'm appreciative.
Part of the reason you're here is that one of us has to have a voice, and as you can hear, this is about what I've got. It actually sounds better than it did on the interview I did with Mazen yesterday afternoon, so I'm making some progress. The reason I wanted to have Mike with us today is because Mike's having an interesting year, and I guess what I mean by that is that after spending a couple of years going to most of the major meetings on the circuit and doing a bunch of advocacy things, he's been invited to lots of different kinds of events this year and has really become not the only patient advocate in the space. Obviously, there are a bunch of them, but a guy who's a patient advocate for steatotic liver disease and liver disease winds up going to a bunch of different kinds of meetings with different organizations. I know one of them is ISPOR, which is an organization I used to go to when I ran the marketing research firm because they did all the pricing and outcomes research. They're the pricing and outcomes research person. So I wanted Mike to talk a little bit about A, what he's going to be doing this year, and B, the process by which he's come to be invited to present and speak at all this stuff, and what it says to you, Mike, about how people are looking at patients and patient advocacy, how professionals are looking at patients and patient advocacy in this space in 2025. So with that, because I can't talk that much, I'm going to let you go, and I'll just stop and ask questions from time to time.
A rare opportunity with you to get the last word, first word, middle word. I have really learned and listened to what people want to know more about. And the opportunity to go to conferences around the world is rare. And I would like to be the one who can share back information that is real time with people who don't have the opportunity to attend these meetings. So I feel quite fortunate that I get to be, as you've shared before, the one sitting in the front row center, paying very close attention to every word that the speakers are saying so that I can share it back as it's happening. And I do post a lot of different topics and research papers and discussions with key opinion leaders from around the world. But I find that one of the most popular activities is really sharing back these live presentations as they're happening, because it gives people a chance to really relate to the speakers and the topics in a timely manner and actually share back comments with others as I post them. And some of those activities that I share have in the 30, 40, even sometimes 50% engagement rate, which means that it's very important to people. And that's why I'm going to continue to do those from conferences really around the world. So they have Canadian conferences. There's also the ones in the United States and also the ones in Europe. So I get a chance to be at as many as I can in a year. And I actually have, I think, between 15 and 20 booked in the next 12 months. So that's a lot.
As you've been to all these conferences, what are some of the things you're learning about the community that surprises you? We'll talk about the content in a minute, but you also get to touch the community more often and in more different ways than, and by that I mean the academic and the policy communities and all those folks, right?
Well, it's the academic community, the research community, the clinician community, there's the patient advocacy community, there's the aspects about multidisciplinary inclusion as well. And so you're right. I can't put my finger exactly on the differences between the different conferences. Some of them stand out. In particular, the Liver Forum for Collaborative Research, which I just came back from, that is very clearly set up to involve researchers and industry and government and patient advocates to work closely together to maximize synergies, to share information about the research that they're doing, to try to improve patient outcomes by reducing maybe the length of studies or the need for biopsies or, the inclusion, reduction of stigma, all of those things. So those ones are really clearly about those types of people working together in different job functions, which I think is really important. There are also a lot of meetings like I find ASLD and EASL are a mix of probably all those groups as well, but they're more about some of the research, updated research that's happening, as well as clinical applications in practice. What are the practical suggestions, insights, tips that we can use in our clinics? I mean, that type of thing happens a lot as well. So that was an interesting question because it is a little bit of a different culture at different meetings.
Tell all of us about one meeting you've been to in the last 6 months or year that was really different than what you expected and why.
The last one I went to that I was surprised, and it was a bit of a pilot for me, was the American Diabetes Association. And I wanted to explore the importance of creating that conduit between the liver space and the diabetes space. There's also the obesity area too, which was actually covered at the diabetes conference as well. But I went there and it was Zubair Younasi and Mazen Nuruddin, I think were the only two speakers there that I knew. But I had an opportunity to meet so many people and learn so much about the interconnectiveness between those two disciplines and why they're important. And I'm also learning that the liver was not, front and center at a lot of that. So I'm hoping this year is going to be different. But with regard to the surprise, it was like, wow, I'm really happy I went to this because I wouldn't normally have gone to that conference. And I liked it so much. I joined the ADA and I also joined ACE, which is a conference I'm going to go to for the first time this year as well.
When is ACE? That's coming right up, isn't it? Relatively quickly.
The ACE conference is May 15th to 17th.
You're going to go from Amsterdam to ACE, huh?
I'm going to go, well, yeah, I have things in between, but it's part of my own clinical care pathway, my educational care pathway. Yeah.
Go to Toronto, go to the doctor. Got it. Okay, fine. So that's interesting. And how do people at say I mean, Jorn's talked about this a little bit from the medical perspective about going to EASD and some things are going on at UEG. But how do people respond to you when they understand that what you're about is a whole different part of metabolism than the one that they live in?
I think numbers speak for themselves. And so for me, one of the indicators are the number of new connections that I make personally and through the connection with the Fatty Liver Alliance. And so when I go to conferences like that, I absolutely see an influx of new followers at those meetings. I actually participate too. So I have stood up at the microphone and asked questions that are relevant to liver that they may not have heard. And so that's still new for them. But it was a really great interaction opportunity. I even had the opportunity at the ADA to learn more about the CGM, the continuous glucose monitor. So Dexcom has one that I use every year. But when you're at the conference, you can actually go to talks where they're sharing the importance of getting that feedback for patients and understanding why it works and why it's important. Rachel, one of the nurses that are there as an example, actually signed me up and I got a CGM while I was there and I put it on right at the conference as well. And by the way, the other whole area about obesity, I was invited to do a talk at the Obesity Summit. That's the European Association for Study of Obesity. That's in Malaga. That one is the one that is right after EASL. So I'm facilitating a panel there, and we're going to be talking about the connection between liver and obesity. So there is definitely an openness, I guess, or opportunity for co-learning between these disciplines.
Tell me a little bit, or tell our audience again, a little bit about what they've learned from you that surprises you and what you've learned from them that surprises you. In meetings with other disciplines, is there anything that when you talk to the diabetes people, the obesity people about liver, you're either surprised that they don't know or they're surprised at how much it should mean to them? And then I'm going to flip the question again and ask you, how about things that you've heard that surprised you?
What I learned from it, I'll go take that route first because I'm there to learn. That's the reason in my mind I'm going to these things is to try to enhance my abilities in the liver space. And the number one thing that I've learned, and I think it came from the quite a few obesity summits and conferences I've gone to recently, that words matter. And stigma is a big thing that we don't think about very often. And so I've changed the way that I am using some of the language that I have in this people first perspective, looking at the language choices like patients live with obesity or patients who have cirrhosis, not cirrhotic patients or MASLD patients. And I think 90% of clinicians still say, I hear it all the time, oh, I just saw a MASH patient last week. Let's get away from the MASH patient and say a patient who has MASH. We shouldn't be defined by our disease. There are a number of co-investigators involved in a paper that's going to be coming out just before EASL with Jeff Lazarus leading it. I know Shira Zelbersagi's part of it and I'm part of it. And it's a people first charter on why language matters. So that's something I learned a lot about, is just the sensitivity that people can use that need to use the right words. The other thing is it's extremely important for clinicians to ask permission before they start to give advice. And that sounds so contra what we've learned and what we expect from physicians, because we usually go to physicians and we want them to tell us what to do. But when it comes to patients and the sensitivity that patients have who are living with obesity, as an example, as one of the big risk factors for MASLD and MASH, before you start telling people to lose weight, it's really important to understand why, how long, and ask permission. Is it okay to talk about this with you? Because they may not want to talk about it. And we have to learn to consider people's feelings more.
I'm going to ask an insensitive and naive question that isn't one I would normally ask myself, but I think some of your other listeners might, which is, well, if it's something people need to learn about and they don't want to talk about it, then isn't that kind of their tough luck?
So that question is something that came up also at an obesity event that I went to. And what that specialist said is, how we've talked about I love myself the way I am aspect of it. So what this physician said is that if patients are living with obesity, but their health has not been impacted, which is possible, then that's fine. If their health is impacted, then the physician has to talk about the outcomes, but maybe in a way that does not talk about that particular person's physique or body, and more about, for example, in our space, the fat that is around the liver. It's different. There are a lot of doctors that say you need to lose your liver fat. They don't say you need to lose body fat. And so there's the visceral fat, which is the bad fat that we're concerned about, although there is definitely a relationship between other things like, the abdominal waist circumference and all of that stuff as indicators.
So part of this becomes simply, how do you listen to patients? And based on what you hear, what is appropriate to discuss and how is it appropriate to discuss it? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah. My favorite topic, Roger, of all is the importance of tailored care. And we keep hearing, and it shows up in the slide decks all the time, where we have a patient-centric approach, a patient-centric model. But we need to remember that all of the work that we all do with regard to clinical research and with regard to the work we do every day is for the benefit and the outcomes of patients. So patient care is really important. One of the challenges that primary care has, and specialists as well, is the amount of work that they have. The opportunity to do that work in the time that they have is a big challenge. So when there's a waiting room full of people and a patient walks in, if the clinician can realize that the patient is already stressed out because they were waiting and they're worrying and they're probably up for a night or two before worrying about their condition and, are they going to live or not live and what's going to mean for their life changes. Then they come into the doctor's office already sensing the doctor's busy, so they're afraid to ask the questions that really matter to them. So we encourage people to come prepared with questions to ask the doctors so that they can have a really meaningful conversation. And one of the things that some clinicians do, and it's because they have to do it, is entering into the EMR. And it's just distracting, I think, for patients that when they finally get to the doctor and they've waited and they go in the clinic and then the doctor's back is sort of turned to them while they're looking at the file and entering data, there's less communication. So somehow we have to get to the point where we can do that cost-benefit balance thing between, okay, I have like 5 to 8 minutes or whatever the time is with the patient. I'm going to try to look them in the eye and ask them what are their concerns today and how I can help them. And then together partner with ways that they could help the patient do better. It can't be a didactic message. It has to be collaborative. Like Jonathan Stein has the exercise prescriptions, and that's a collaboration. It's like, what do you think is a reasonable amount of activity that you can do? And this is what I think that you need to get to, so let's do this. And he'll actually write a prescription. And so that's one approach to trying to solve that collaborative approach to care.
Interesting. That's a question really of how to, and exercise is an interesting one to choose, right? Because exercise is something that a lot of folks who live with obesity, for example, find really challenging to think about, right? As a guy who's lost 50 pounds, talking to a guy who's lost some weight in the course of his life, we both know that getting into exercise when you're significantly overweight is a hard thing to do.
Well, first of all, when we say the recommendation in the guidelines is 150 minutes a week, plus you should do some muscle strengthening exercises as well. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, moderate exercise. Okay, it sounds reasonable. It makes, say, 10,000 steps still seems to be the target that people should get, except if some people are living with obesity and they have a lot of extra weight, 10,000 steps is really, really going to be hard for them to start. So they need to literally take the first step of that journey and work their way up. And that is, I think, one of the topics of discussion with their physician is, where are you at right now and where do you think you can get to, and what's stopping you? Maybe together they can come up with ways to get them a little bit closer to what they need to be at.
That's interesting. I don't know about you, but when I started needing to lose a lot of weight and I started going into the gym, I really couldn't do very much. It was kind of appalling to me because I'd been a pretty good athlete, or not pretty good athlete, but a pretty good endurance person, moderate athlete. It meant the world to me that people would encourage me and that people would come up to me and say, hey, I was where you are and this is where I am now. Just one step at a time, you can do this. So are there any kind of, in the places that you're going, in the meetings that you're going to, are there positive feedback loops of any kind built in to communicate to patients that way in those moments?
There have been at many conferences, well, really all of them have opportunities for Q&A with speakers. The only thing is most patients or patient advocates haven't had the courage always to stand up in front of physicians and speak. So it's not something that's very common, but for example, EASL's coming up, and there is specifically a patient session, which I would love if anybody who's going to EASL would come to. And Shira Zelbersagi and I are on the panel. And it's really going to help a lot of patients if they listen to some of the talks. For example, some of the topics are about patients that have difficulty getting the same care as other patients because of either where they live, or maybe it's socioeconomic or some other reason, or it could be even stigma related. So I think that whole session is going to be really interesting. But those are opportunities where patients can interact with the panels as an example.
Okay, so what have you been able to convey to people in these meetings that they didn't know? I mean, when you go to a diabetes meeting or an obesity meeting, for example.
Well, I think I share at those points how patients that have MASLD or MASH can benefit from a lot of those tips and tricks, if you will, that they're sharing at those meetings. So, the liver, like you said, it is not something that's brought up all the time, but when you're at the conference and they're talking, as an example, they're talking about the use of CGMs and how they benefit patients because they give continual feedback on the types of foods that are eaten and the impact on the glucose and, inevitably that insulin response. So just that one patient tool can also help the MASLD and MASH communities because they can help reduce the amount of fat that's going to be stored in the liver. And so that's one example.
One of the impressions I keep getting over and over again is that those communities don't really know a lot about liver. Is that accurate in your experience in the meetings you go to? That people who aren't part of the liver community don't know a lot about liver and how liver fits into all this?
I absolutely agree that this is the beginning of that relationship. From our perspective, I do believe that it's going to be up to us to connect with them on their space, in their world, to be able to share that back. The fact that they already had last year 2 speakers, and I know that they're going to have more this year, shows that there is some interest in that area. And even industry started to be there. The liver space industry started to have booths, a couple of them last year at those events, like the diabetes event. So I am going to go out of my way. I'm making a commitment right here with you right now that at these meetings, I am going to listen for opportunities where I can express a connection between what they're talking about at that moment and the struggles that liver patients have and that the community needs to learn. So that's a good first step to at least bring it up in a group setting like that.
Point well taken. And because we will have you back on the podcast, we'll be able to check and see how effectively you've done that and what you've learned in the process. Okay, so I guess I'm particularly interested in ISPOR. Have you been to an ISPOR meeting or any of the policy meetings yet?
No, this is the first one, and I was invited to be there. There's a symposium that is sponsored by Novo Nordisk, actually. And when I was asked, I go, you want me to go to a global health economics conference? It's weird, but having a patient there express the impact of inaction in the MASH area is important for that particular event. Just to let you know, the other people that are going to be there, and this is on May 15th in Montreal, the people that are going to be there are Jeff Lazarus. Of course, he's fantastic at speaking about the global perspective, and Sonal Kumar, so, of hepatology from that perspective. And Donna Cryer is going to be moderating that event. So it's going to be a really interesting panel discussion for sure.
Oh, that should be fantastic. And since you've not been to a pure policy or economics meeting like that before, asking you how those are different would be a little premature, but we will get back to you with that at some point later in the year.
Well, my messaging is a little different. I actually did some research, and I have on one of the slides just the impact of inaction in dollars and the impact that can be made if we actually do something, between now and 2050, I think. It sounds hard when you say 2050. It's like a long way away, but...
Oh, it's a long way away. If you're our age, and I'm a lot older than you are, but the odds that either one of us is going to be hanging out in 2050 are kind of interesting, if I put that correctly.
My uncle used to say to buy green bananas, so keep buying your green bananas so that you can be there while they ripen.
That's a lot better than the old George Burns line about how you live to be 100. Start when you're 20 and smoke one cigar a day every day for 80 years. That's not exactly a health concept. I like the green bananas a lot better. So only one other question, which is, as you Look, just for those who don't know, Mike started out as a sales rep in a drug company selling interferon and ribavirin for hepatitis back in the day.
No, 1988, I was doing dermatology and I launched Claritin, believe it or not. So that was the beginning of that. But the first specialty drug in the liver space was Intron A for hepatitis B. And then after that was non-A, non-B, because they didn't even have a name for hepatitis C yet.
Right.
That's how long I've been doing this for.
Mike has traversed the path from specialty sales rep to industry person, now to patient advocate. If you knew then what you know now, how would you have approached the idea of being a sales rep or a marketer inside a drug company differently than you did at the time?
I swear that I'm telling you the truth. I would not change a thing. And I thought a lot about why I feel like I can be the one of, there's obviously many very capable patient advocates too, but why I can be one that shares messages that are relevant to industry as well as to patients, as well as to physicians, is because everything I've done has led up to this. And when you can say that about a role that you're in, it just means a lot to me. When I wake up and I go, well, first I have to learn what physicians want to know. And in a way, a lot of what I'm doing is the same thing I did when I was a rep. So instead of going to the university library on Mondays, the day that the new journals came in, photocopying the papers that I knew that the physicians wanted, and then running to their office to be with a note, or if I didn't see them, to be the first one to bring it to their office. Now we're using social media to share the messages and those papers. So it's just a modern way of doing this, the same thing, which is really funny in my mind. That's one piece of it. And I learned about the sensitivities of the pharma industry and the respect that you have to have for legal and regulatory. And so that moderates some of what I do so that I know what we can and what we can and shouldn't do. And plus, I was involved in a lot of patient advocacy when we were trying to get medications for hepatitis C approved, as an example. So I had a chance to relate to patients even back then and understand some of the challenges with reimbursement or clinical trial enrollment, early access programs, all of that stuff. So everything I did has given me more confidence in what I'm doing today. And I'm very grateful for that whole run of experience that I've had.
Interesting. As you know, my background was different. You came out of the industry. I came out of service and support to the industry. And one of the differences I found is that my ability to deliver a clear message unfiltered by corporate politics and individual priorities is much greater. I bumped into a guy who used to work for me Saturday night at a social event here, and he asked me what's different. And I said, well, what's different now is if you have something you want to deliver, it actually gets transmitted the way you deliver it, as compared to what happens when it passes through three people's ears and mouths based on their own agenda and needs. So I feel a lot cleaner that way, but it's interesting because you were talking to docs. I guess that's a little different. So as we wind down this particular conversation, what advice would you have for our listeners who are providers about what to take away from your talk, from this conversation, or what meetings they should go to, or what they should try to access that they might not be thinking about right now? Start there.
I'm going to fall back on my key message, number one, and that's to treat every patient like they're an individual. There is no way to treat every patient the same way and to just tell patients, and this is one I've heard back many times from patients themselves. So telling patients that they need to eat less and exercise more, and you'll see them in 6 months, is completely inappropriate now. Every patient has different challenges, and so you need to take a few minutes just to talk to the patient, especially at the first initial visit, and learn about what their challenges are so you can help be a problem solver with them. So my message is treat people like individuals, treat them like you would want to be treated as a patient, which you or someone in your family most likely is or will be, and you will have a great relationship with the patient and really help them in the long term.
Interesting. And listening to you, a question came to mind that I don't think I've ever asked you or anybody else. If I look at you and I'm the doctor and you're the patient and I say to you, exercise more, lose weight, and come see me in 6 months, there's a presumption that you haven't tried that yet.
100% true.
And what percentage of patients would you guess have tried to lose weight or exercise more before they get to the doctor in the first place?
99.9. If you asked me a different question and you said, what percentage of people know how to do those things, I would say it's maybe half. Because I do hear a lot of people who you talk about cutting back on fructose as an example, the types of foods that they're eating that they just somehow have not been exposed to the fact that high carbohydrate diets are not very good for you in the long term. And so I think the how, I agree that less people are informed and educated that way. And that could also be cultural impact too. The way that they eat, the social activities that they participate in, all of that adds pressures to eat when maybe we're not hungry. And so I think that's a partial driver of that.
So in open-ended questioning then, and I know this is a long list question, please forgive me. In open-ended questioning, instead of telling you to lose weight and exercise more, I would start by asking you, have you tried to do that in the past? And what have you done? And has it worked for you? Now, that assumes I've got the 3 minutes to do that, but that's the right way to go there, isn't it?
That's a fantastic question to ask. The physicians are going to ask themselves first, do I have time to listen to the answer that I'm going to get? And so the utility of the question that you suggest is bang on 100%. The practicality is going to be up to the physician to know how much time they have. So they do have to balance the patients that are coming. If they ask some patients that question, they could be there for 20 minutes. And I think that's a fear, which is why they might not ask open-ended questions like that.
Well, it's interesting. You don't have to ask that question to everybody, but if you know that the question is available, there might be some people who would really benefit from it. Is it Jose Willems who made the comment that the question you should ask everybody, or Tom Marjo, the question you should ask everybody once a year is, tell me what's changed in your life in the last year?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I've heard that as well. I think especially the patients that you start to have indications that there are comorbidities that could impact, in our case today, the discussion we're having, liver health. If it's going to impact their liver health and they already have some indicators, maybe even on the first visit, or you've gotten back biomarkers or other types of information that says that they're going to be at risk, those are the ones that you spend the extra time with, maybe asking those questions if you do have to titrate the time you have available for patients.
So, Mike, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been a great conversation. And I look forward to seeing you next month in Amsterdam. Will probably be the next time we get together.
I will definitely save a seat for you.
It's a deal. Thanks. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Please join us again next week when we start a new roundtable on advances in drug development in the last year, while our newsmakers and experts explore current issues and major ideas.
Until then, stay safe, surf on, and we'll see you next week on the Surfing the Mass Tsunami podcast. Hopefully I'll have my whole voice back by then. Bye-bye now.